Hi, you've probably heard about the standard American diet that's not very good for us, probably making us fat, maybe sick. Do you know why? Well, Zen Honeycutt, our guest today, is going to tell us why. She's the founder of momsacrossamerica.org, which is an organization, a grassroots organization that has gotten a lot of moms activated in finding out what is going on with our food supply, specifically in school lunches, as well as now the fast food industry. Recently, they conducted a study of the food industry and they found some shocking results. You've got to hear this. It's scary, but also something you must know for you and your family to protect them. Zen's a return guest for us, which we love. She spoke to us the first time about autism, allergies, and how you can help alleviate some of those symptoms through your child's diet. Today, she's going to talk to us about not just school lunches, but also fast food, the food industry, the restaurant industry, all the places that we get food. You're not going to want to miss this. Stay tuned for a groundbreaking, earth-shaking episode that you will absolutely be fascinated by. Thanks so much. Hello, this is Mary Jo Timlin from the Teaching Your Toddler Show. Today we have a return guest. We love return guests. Our guest today is Zen Honeycutt from momsacrossamerica.org, and she's going to talk to us about an amazing topic. If you haven't listened to her other message or her other episode that we recorded, it was around allergies and symptoms that can happen in your children based on the food they eat. This is almost like a follow-up to that, and she and her organization have recently done a study that I know you're going to want to hear about and more, and she's doing a ton of work in Washington and all the things. So Zen, welcome back to the show. Take a minute and introduce yourself to us.
Thank you, Mary Jo, and thank you to all your listeners. I really appreciate it. If this is your first time experiencing an interview with me, I guess I just like to give a little bit of background that I started this nonprofit, Moms Across America, 12 years ago, along with a great group of women, moms, and we are amplifying the voices of moms. We call ourselves a national coalition of unstoppable moms, and our motto is Empowered Moms, Healthy Kids. Now, we have lots of dads, and our mission is to educate and empower mothers and others with actions and solutions to create healthy communities. And we primarily focus on the food supply. We started out looking at what the GMOs that were in the food supply and how they related to our children's allergies and health issues. And then we expanded into glyphosate, which is what 80% of GMOs, genetically modified organisms, are engineered to withstand. And we also learned that glyphosate is sprayed as a drying agent on many of our grains. So if you are consuming non-organic food, you're likely consuming glyphosate with practically every meal if you're eating grains. So we expanded into going after basically glyphosate, trying to get it banned. And there's been a lot of restrictions and successes and bans in 60 different countries around the world since we found glyphosate in breast milk and tap water in our children's urine. We initiated that first glyphosate testing in America, and we've marched in 4th of July parades to raise awareness about GMOs and labeling, and we've had over 1,000 events happen in all 50 states from 600 of our leaders. So we have a expanding and growing network. We're networking with Japan and China and Australia, New Zealand, like places around the world, because mothers around the world are finding that their children have increasing numbers of life-threatening allergies, autism symptoms, autoimmune issues, asthma, chronic childhood illnesses. In fact, it's 54% of children now have a chronic illness. So we are finding, however, that when parents switch their children to organic food, they see dramatic improvements, which is what I've seen in my children who went from 20 something different food allergies to being able to eat eggs and wheat and even nuts without having to go to the hospital, and dairy and all the foods that they pretty much want to eat as long as they eat organic. So my background is is being a mom that wanted to protect my kids and get the word out to other moms to support their children's health. And we are seeing incredible improvements when we do that.
Mobilized moms are awesome, aren't they?
Oh yeah, we're
Very
unstoppable.
powerful.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So the organization recently did a study on the fast food industry. Tell us a little bit about what your findings were there.
Sure. We tested the top 20 fast food restaurants plus one, which was In-N-Out, and In-N-Out is rated number 33. They're not the top 20, but we included In-N-Out because we have board members in California that were like, well, In-N-Out's got to be safer, you know? And we tested fast food because the year before we tested school lunches, which we may have addressed on your
Yes, we did.
podcast.
Yes.
Yeah, so we tested because we found out that fast food suppliers are the primary suppliers of our school lunches. You
Oh,
know,
wow.
Domino's Pizza, Del Taco, different, fast food suppliers are the ones supplying the foods to our children for their school lunches. And so we were alarmed by that and we wanted to follow up with testing on the fast food. And what we found was 100% of the samples were positive for glyphosate and AMPA, which is the breakdown of glyphosate, which is toxic. It's an endocrine disruptor, it's a carcinogen, it causes liver and kidney disease at very low levels. It contributes to breast cancer. It damages sperm. Glyphosate has been shown to androgenize baby girls, yet to cause the masculinization of their reproductive areas, and to cause neurological damage and nervous system damage. I mean, it's basically been linked to about 40 different Western diseases that we're seeing in America today that our great grandparents never saw, right? Or hardly ever saw. So glyphosate, according to one of our advisors, Dr. Don Huber, who's a 60-year plant pathologist, like he's been hired by NASA, he's an expert. He's in his 90s and he's still educating farmers and governments about what glyphosate and other toxic chemicals do in the food supply. He says that glyphosate is going to make DDT look like mouthwash. Yeah. And so it was found in 100% of fast food samples. If you recall, it was found in, I think it was 93.4% of school lunch samples. We found heavy metals in 100% of fast food samples, levels up to over 1,000% higher than what the EPA allows in drinking water. That was specifically cadmium found in In-N-Out French fries. Unfortunately, French fries and sweet potato fries in the school lunches were found to have some of the highest levels of cadmium, which is a carcinogen. And we found over 900% higher the amount of lead in a Sonic cheeseburger. And so the burger, the red meat, is as being found to have high levels of lead. Red meat often has that. And so the heavy metals were just pervasive in 100% of the samples. And what we were shocked to find out, Mary Jo, is that the FDA does not regulate heavy metals in our food supply. They have
What?
very minimal heavy metal regulation, and it's only in applesauce, some policy for baby food because the very high levels were found a couple years ago in baby food, but it's not even like regulation yet. It's just guidance right now in baby food. They don't have permission from our Congress, from our elected officials to actually regulate heavy metals in baby food. They only have policy out right now, like guidance, And then they do have some regulation on heavy metals in candy. And this is only because, consumer type organizations like ours and Consumer Reports tested and found heavy metals
And shame
in
them
these
into it.
and shamed them into it. Yeah, this is not because they're actually doing their job. So, so they have no other heavy metal regulation in other foods. And we were appalled by this. And this is one of the reasons why we went to Washington, D.C. last week. But I'll get to that in a bit. So the rest of the fast food
Can I ask you
results,
about the metals first before we move
sure.
on to that? So,
Absolutely. Sure.
so
Please.
glyphosates clearly are being sprayed on the crops. How are
Yeah.
heavy metals getting into the food?
Yes, that's a good point. So glyphosate's being sprayed as a weed killer and also as a drying agent on crops. So we know why it's there, right? And the 80% of the exposure is because of the drying agent aspect. It's sprayed just before a crop is harvested, wheats, peas, grains, legumes, things like that. So high levels of residues, those could be diminished just by stopping the spraying of glyphosate as a drying agent, right? So we know why that's happening. Other countries have done it, right? Europe, they don't spray glyphosate as a drying agent anymore. Pretty much that's why you can go to Italy and eat the bread there and not get rashes and get sick, right? So we know the glyphosate issue, and we simply need political courage for that to be changed. And that would impact, as I said, like probably 40 different Western medical diseases. Heavy metals is that the proponents of, being able to do whatever they want in the food supply will say, oh, well, heavy metals are naturally occurring. Well, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be monitoring the levels, right? Because they're not only naturally occurring, they are also present in Roundup, in glyphosate. They found arsenic and heavy metals in the actual weed killers. And this is because many of the pesticides and herbicides are comprised of petroleum sludge, like leftover sludge from the oil industry, from fracking, from places like that, right? So there's petroleum products in pesticides and herbicides, and they can contain heavy metals from the ground, right? And also these, because glyphosate is sprayed as a drying agent on these grains that animals eat, it will then be on the grains that the animals eat, goes into their feces, and then their feces is used as manure, especially on organic crops, because organic crops can't use straight up chemicals, synthetic chemicals like conventional farming can. So organic crops need to have either fertilizer from, pigs and cows and chickens or from fish. And we all know that there's heavy metals in fish. So we're suspecting both, the confined animal factory operation, cows and pigs and chickens, their manure having heavy metals in it. We're also suspecting the fish emulsion of fertilizers to have heavy metals in it. The other reason could be industrial waste, these industrial steel manufacturers and tin and aluminum, all these manufacturers that dump their waste into
The
rivers.
runoff. Mm.
That industrial waste can be used as can be contaminate the waterways, and then when they use that water to water the crops, that could then be contributing to heavy metals. The other way is that some spices, especially like cinnamon, and we're suspecting chocolate, which is high in lead, cinnamon is high in lead, is ground up by machinery parts, like gears, right? It's ground up by metal, which we suspect, and Michael Hansen from Consumer Reports suspects that, and especially in third world countries, could be comprised of lead parts. And so bits of lead could be getting into the food that way. If you think about it, like ice cream scoopers and pots and pans used to be made out, I think maybe lead or aluminum or
Hmm.
different. So there's ways for lead to be getting into many ways for these heavy metals to be getting into the food supply. And so, but just because there are naturally occurring ways doesn't mean that food manufacturers shouldn't be responsible for monitoring the levels that are in their products. And it's only an $85 test to test for cadmium, lead, mercury, and arsenic. It goes up to about 140 if you add in aluminum and possibly other chemicals. But we're concerned. We found very high levels of aluminum in some baby formulas, and we that report is pending. We need to have legal go over it before we can release the information. We have to be careful about that. But I just want to put that out there because I want people to be aware that as much as possible to please breastfeed or to use human milk banks. That is very important. And we think that the aluminum might be coming from, if not industrial waste, from the cloud seeding that is happening, geoengineering. Some people think it's a conspiracy, but it's actually not. They are putting things into clouds in order to generate rain. They have good intentions, but we are very concerned about aluminum being one of those additives, and the aluminum getting onto grass and grass-fed milks and things like that having aluminum in it. So there are many ways that heavy metals and toxic metal, aluminum is considered a toxic metal, not a heavy metal,
Mm.
because of the type of toxicity, like the body can process it better than lead, arsenic, cadmium, and mercury. But that doesn't mean we should have high levels, because aluminum has been connected to autism and Alzheimer's.
Mm.
It
Which is in
caused initial,
deodorant if you,
yeah,
or antiperspirant, right? If you're using
an
antiperspirants.
antiperspirant, yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Right. Wow, I had no idea it was that broad for heavy metals. I thought it was just like there's some lead maybe, but goodness, that's a lot. So what else have you all found?
So we found veterinary drugs and hormones in fast food, and we're very concerned about that. 40 to 60% contained antibiotics that that are things like monosin and narasin, antibiotics that are not approved for human consumption, and shown to be very toxic to humans. Also to dogs and horses, there's one of the antibiotics that causes the hind legs of dogs and horses to go paralyzed. And they could only know this because it happened, right? Because sometimes they mix up the feed for cows and pigs, with dogs and horses. A lot of these companies make animal feed for all different kinds of
Multiple.
animals.
Right.
So I'm very concerned about that. I know a lot of people whose dogs, especially German Shepherds, their hind legs have gone paralyzed. And I'm
Yeah,
concerned
we kind
about
of take that
kids.
for granted and like, oh, big dogs get that, right? But now, gosh, maybe it's because of this.
Yeah, because of the antibiotics in the
Hmm.
animal feed. And then I'm also wondering if it's doing that to humans. You've seen people when you go to county fairs that are sitting in little scooters and their legs are swollen up and purple. They can't walk. I'm wondering if they're consuming fast food with these antibiotics that are causing their legs to be impacted. We just don't know. The other thing we found is an antiparasitic called nicarbazine, and it's also an aviary contraceptive. It causes chickens to stop laying eggs, birds to not lay eggs. They actually use it for geese and pigeons around airports and state capitals because they don't want the birds to be laying eggs there. And so this was found in 4 school lunches and in Chick-fil-A sandwiches, the chicken. And it can be used for meat birds, right? Because they're not laying eggs, but it's not used for egg laying birds. And I'm concerned also that that is what happened when there was a time about 2 years ago when chickens were stopped laying eggs. People were complaining that their backyard chickens, right? I think the animal feed was contaminated with this nicarbazine, and was mixed up with chicken feed that was possibly being given to meat birds. So that is very concerning, because if our little girls are consuming, something that prevents the birds from releasing eggs, from being fertile, what are we doing to this entire generation of children? And what is it doing to boys? We don't know what it does to their hormones and the reproductive systems. And so that was found in, as I said, 4 school lunches and in Chick-fil-A sandwiches. And after this, Chick-fil-A came out with a statement, because they used to have a no antibiotics ever statement, NAE. Then they came out with no antibiotics important to human medicine statement. So, oh, we are going to have antibiotics in our Chick-fil-A sandwiches. They're just not going to be important to human medicine. Who knows what that means?
I
What,
heard that,
what does that mean?
and the response was, well, we don't want you. Why do you want the chickens to, we want to have meat chickens, right? They sort of defended themselves. Well, of course we have birth control in our, chicken meat or whatever, because we don't want them to have eggs. We want them to be for meat. And it's like, well, that interesting that they've just sort of twisted the words there.
Well, they say my understanding was that they were saying that it was for just important for to reduce the parasites and to, for them to be healthy and,
Oh, so
that
they
sort
were
of
trying to
thing.
say it was
Yeah,
healthier.
yeah.
Gotcha.
We need the chickens to be healthy, and there's too
Mm.
much bird flu, and there's, it's just important. There's too much sickness going. Well, there's too much sickness going around in chickens because they're eating glyphosate sprayed in the grains, which weakens their immune system. It's an antimicrobial, and it targets the beneficial gut bacteria and allows for the proliferation of the pathogenic gut bacteria. That's one of the ways that it functions. It also functions as a chelator, meaning it makes unavailable, grabs onto and makes unavailable the vital nutrients of any living thing it touches. It essentially gives the plant AIDS, and that's how the plant dies, because the normally harmless bacteria kills the plant. So we're weakening the immune system of the plant or the chicken, right, that's eating it, and we're destroying the beneficial gut bacteria, right? So no wonder why there's super bugs and they need more and more antibiotics. It's because of
Wow.
the glyphosate. So, and this is why 80% of the bacteria that causes UTIs in women comes from chicken, according to Dr. Mercola. Yeah. So, I never eat chicken out unless I know it's organic and pasture raised. Never, because I have experienced one of those UTIs. And then I took an antibiotic eventually after 2 months of trying to do it naturally. And I got what they call floxed. It was a fluoroquinine, and it caused the tendons in my shoulders to tear. So for a year and a half, I was in chronic pain from torn tendons in my shoulders because of this antibiotic that's a fluoroquinine. So yeah, never. No, I think that chicken is possibly one of the worst. Also, there's high levels of arsenic in the chicken feed, so high that one of our Moms Across America supporters, whose husband is a trucker, said that he had to get a hazmat license in order just to transport chicken feed because the levels of arsenic are so high. And they put arsenic in the chicken feed because it makes the chicken's gut swell and bloat so that they eat more. So it basically makes them sick so that they eat more and they get fatter faster. So then you're eating sick chickens, right? So yeah, so veterinary drugs and hormones, which are, should not be in the food. No response from the FDA yet about that. We'll get to our meeting with them. And then we also found very low levels of minerals, of course. And like you'd have to eat a child would have to eat 9 servings of chicken nuggets in order to get enough copper in his recommended daily, level of copper. Copper is very important in the balance of zinc and autism. And we also found very low levels of vitamin B3. We found zero vitamin B9 and B12, which is essential for prefrontal cortex development. And so is vitamin B3. And we found levels so low that you as a woman would have to eat 333 Chick-fil-A sandwiches in one day in order to get your recommended vitamin B3 levels. And a man would have to eat 380. So that's not cheap food, right? That is what I call the high cost of cheap food, because you're not getting the nutrients that you think you might be getting. I mean, people know that fast food is not great, but you think you're at least getting some form of nutrition because you're actually paying for food. But according to the lab owner, there are actually more toxins in fast food than nutrients. So that means that's what's happening in school lunches as well. So I'm sorry, moms watching this and dads, it really is important that you make organic lunches for your children, or they make them. You get the food. That's what I do with my kids. I buy the food that they make the list and request stuff, and I buy it organic, and then they make their own school lunches, because when they make it, they're more interested in eating it. It's like they've made that choice that morning. And so it's very important. And the vitamin B's, if I could talk a little bit about that, why we tested and
Yeah.
for vitamin B's, it's so important. And it was like $800 a test for vitamin B's. It was not cheap, right? But I read this book called Food and Behavior: A Natural Connection by Barbara Reed Stitt. She is a Lifetime Achievement Award winner. She studied the food supply for over 20 years, and each one of her studies included at least 1,000, if not thousands of people for a year at a time. So very extensive, placebo control, all kinds of studies, and in-person studies on humans, which meant that she would study a prison system with, hundreds, if not thousands of people. And what she found was that within 1 to 2 weeks, the aggressive behavior, the violent acts, which are recorded at a prison, would drop 50 to 70% just with vitamin and mineral supplementation. And they were placebo control groups, right? They could tell 50 to 70% in 1 to 2 weeks decline in violence. And within 1 year of feeding them whole, healthy foods, getting rid of the candies and the sodas and, all of the junk foods with the dyes and the GMOs and glyphosate and all that stuff, within 1 year of doing that, the recidivism rate switched. And what that means is that instead of prisoners coming into prison, going out whenever they went out, right? Going out and coming back in within a year. That's the recidivism rate. How many come back in within a year? 70% used to come back in within a year. And when they ate whole healthy foods, 70% went out and stayed out.
And stayed out. Wow. Oh my
Recidivism
goodness.
rate switched. And in a high school of 5,000 kids, instead of 500 dropping out in the school that she studied, when they switched to whole healthy foods, only 14 dropped out.
That is significantly
Yes.
different.
And the one thing that these dropouts and the criminals all bragged that they had in common was not where they lived or their socioeconomic background or the color of their skin, as some might imagine, according to the prison population. It was actually whether they're rich or poor, or black or white, or whatever race. One thing they all bragged that they had in common was that they lived on junk food.
Hmm.
Right. So for instance, I'm just making this up, but I'm just like, they just ate pizza and Coke or Hot Pockets and Pepsi, right? Like they lived on junk food. And so when she tested them, she found that they had very low levels of vitamin B, which again affects the prefrontal cortex, which is where good decision making happens, right? It's going to be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't hit that person. I want to hit that person, but I'm not going to hit that person, right? That's where the prefrontal cortex kicks in. And if that's not developed properly, they're not going to be controlling that behavior. And what we noticed was this correlated with a study out of a University of Strasbourg, this violence that I'm going to talk about. There was a study that showed there was a decline in a hamster population in a GMO. Well, we don't know if it was GMO. They said monocrop cornfield, which was most likely GMO because that's what monocrops are. And the soil in that crop and that cornfield was like sand. It was deficient of nutrients and organic matter, right? And when they tested these hamsters, they found that, well, first of all, they found that the reason for the disturbing the reason for the decline in the hamster population was a very disturbing behavior, and that was that the mother hamsters were cannibalistic. They were eating their young on the first day of life. And when they tested those hamsters, they found that they were completely devoid of vitamin B3.
Hmm.
And when they administered vitamin B3, the cannibalism stopped completely.
Wow.
The violent behavior stopped with one vitamin. So what does that tell us? Does that tell us that we need to actually be spending lots of times on more gun laws that criminals are not going to follow? I mean, criminals are not going to follow gun laws. Or should we be focusing on the reason why the criminals are having the aggressive behavior in the first place,
The root
which
cause, yeah.
is
Hmm.
nutrient lack of nutrients in the food and toxins. By the way, I forgot to mention one of the industrial chemicals or drugs that we found in fast food was butanediol. And butanediol, right in the fact sheet, says that it causes aggressiveness. It causes combativeness, actually, is the exact word, combativeness. And so, is it really like, are we really going to solve this problem with 2 mass shootings a day in America and being the most violent country in the world with gun laws, or are we going to solve this problem with nutrient dense, safe, non-toxic food? I'm voting for the latter, especially when we hear from mothers that they have children that have threatened to blow up a school with a bomb. Yeah. And when she switched her son over to organic food for 2 weeks, the school principal called her and said, "We don't know what you're doing, but this is a completely new child." And when the son was 17, she called me and she said, this happened when he was 9, but when he was 17, she said, that school shooting in Florida had just happened. She said, "I know that my son would have been one of those kids that would have gone out and gotten a gun and shot the kids at his school." And that's a very hard thing for a mother to admit. And she said, "But that's not going to happen because he's eating organic, he's whole, he's healthy, he's responsible, he's working on community gardens, he's going to have a great life." And I'm like, "You know what you did? You gave that child, your son, a new future. And you gave everybody at that school and in your community a new future because they're not going to be mourning the loss and trauma of losing loved ones. And you might have even given our country a new future because who knows what those children, including your son, could do when they grow up. They could become senators, president, invent a new service, create a new product that changes the world." And so that's why we do what we're doing at Moms Across America, is because we want our children and all human beings to be able to live up to their fullest potential. We believe we are here with, for a purpose to fulfill on, and, whatever that is, or whatever people create and want that to be. And we should have the ability to do that. And our country needs us in order to stay, if you want to look at it from a perspective of being a superpower and being safe and secure and national homeland security, we kind of need our people to be able to develop new technologies and to be safe. So we urge parents who are watching this to, when your child first has any type of aggressive behavior, any type of erratic behavior, any type of depression or lack of ability of sleeping or rashes or irritability, first look to what you are feeding your child. And don't say, "Oh, well, he will only eat chicken nuggets or pizza." No, who's giving him that food? You are, right? And he will not starve, or she will not starve, if you switch out that food to organic food. And by the way, there is organic pizza and there is organic, chicken nuggets, right? But whole healthy foods are really the best way to go. Start off with giving your child an organic apple or organic bananas or organic beans, like some protein. Really start with some protein and switch the foods to organic as much as possible, and you will see a difference in your child's behavior within 2 weeks for sure.
That's that's profound. So, I mean, clearly you're passionate about this, and tell us about the work that you're doing at the highest levels of our country to work on these issues.
Well, I want to say that we're so grateful to the people who have donated to be able to support, a plane ticket and travel to Washington, D.C. We went last week. Kelly Ryerson, who's on my board, she's also glyphosatefacts.com. If you want to check her out, she was Glyphosate Girl. She went to every single day of the Monsanto trial and reported on the trial where Monsanto was sued for the connection to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And the plaintiff won, and 144,000 plaintiffs are now being paid out $12 billion. Right. So she reported on that. So she came with me to DC, and we had 2 professional lobbyists, Siekman and Associates, that booked the appointments with the people from their professional experience that they know. And we also got an appointment with the FDA with the head of human foods, Jim Jones, and the head of regulatory affairs, Conrad. I'm sorry, I forgot his last name right now. But we met with them and we reported the information that I just shared with you, and more, more information about baby formula. We also have gluten-free testing coming out, gluten-free food testing coming out, and Girl Scout cookies eventually. And we also tested a cereal called Trix loaded cereal, which, as you could probably guess, is loaded with food dyes, heavy metals, and pesticides, and especially aluminum, very high levels of aluminum, which we're very concerned about. So we told them this information and we're holding them to account. We did get a favorable response. For instance, they do believe that baby formula should be included in the closer to zero policy that I told you about. It's like a guideline for baby food, but baby formula has not been included in that. And we think that's outrageous because baby formula is actually the first food that many babies will consume for up to a year if they're not breastfeeding, and the only food, right, that they will consume. So we think that's outrageous. And the response we got back from the FDA is that they're waiting on Congress to approve the mandate so that they can regulate for heavy metals in baby food. And if they want to add baby formula to that, they need to sort of make that request. So we're requesting that they make that request, and we're requesting that everybody who's listening to this contact your senators and representatives and tell them, will you please make it so that the FDA can actually do their job and regulate heavy metals in baby food and baby formula and all foods. Every single American deserves access to safe, non-toxic, nutrient-dense food. And our elected officials need to do their jobs and make sure that the regulatory agencies have the capacity to do that. And, I just kept hearing we've met with the EPA, we've met with the USDA, we've met the FDA, all these people like, oh, well, we don't have the jurisdiction to do that. We have to stay in our lanes and we can only do, and they're just pointing to other people. Okay, how about, how moms get people together? How about we all get together? How about we have a task force with the EPA, the USDA, and the FDA? So that's what we're calling for now, and consumer groups, right? And if I don't know if the Grocery Manufacturers Association wants to be there, great. Let's get people together and let's be clear about what the independent science says on heavy metals, glyphosate, all these other agrochemicals that are being sprayed as a drying agent on the food supply. What's safe, what's not safe, what's Europe doing, right? Which has far better standards than we do. And by the way, is food manufacturers are making food like cereal for them without red food dyes in Europe, right? And without high levels of GMOs and glyphosate and
So
all
we
these
know
other
it can be done, right?
we know it can be done. It's not impossible. So
Mm-hmm.
how about we get together and make sure that we have a safe food supply before we have an extinction of the human race, right? Because that's where we're headed if we don't do something about this. So that's what we're doing right now. We're holding people to account. And really, I have to tell you, when we met with senators and representatives, we were very surprised the Republicans were more receptive than we thought. The Democrats were like, oh, the Republicans are not going to be receptive. The Republicans were actually more receptive than the Democrats from what we found. And because we feel like it's more like a personal freedom issue, a health freedom, to be able to have access to food that's safe, that's not being polluted. So we're encouraged by that. But we were very concerned that many of the senators and representatives aides who report directly to the senators did not know that glyphosate was being sprayed as a drying agent. They do not know the state of the food supply, did not know the FDA wasn't regulating heavy metals, and do not hear from people like us hardly ever. They hear from the Pepsi and Coke through the beverages manufacturer. They hear from the Grocery Manufacturers Association. They hear from Bayer and Monsanto and Dow and
Mm,
DuPont.
the
They hear
lobby
from
groups.
chemical
Mm,
companies. They hear from
mm,
pharma
mm.
companies. They hear from big oil companies. They don't hear from us. So I have to impress upon your listeners that if you don't know who your senator and your representative are, your congressman and your senator, find out. Just
Mm.
go on, find my representative, find my senator, and go and send them an email. Let them know, call them and let them know what you want, because they need to know that they will not get reelected if they don't put the health of the American people first. And that's what needs to happen now. We need to have safety first.
That's amazing. I was going to ask you, so as we sort of wrap up here, I wanted to find out how can people get involved, and then how could they also, in the meantime, sort of protect themselves? How do you find, I mean, do you just go to like the organic stores and make sure you're buying as much organic as you possibly can? Is that how you sort of protect yourself?
Yes, first of all, mothers breastfeed.
Hmm.
Breastfeed and feed your child organic. And if you can't breastfeed, then get to go to a human milk donors. There's many of them. This has been happening for thousands of generations, totally safe and much more advisable than formula, in my personal opinion. Okay, I'm not a doctor, but from what I've seen, that's what would be advisable. Second of all, eat organic, and eat organic. If you can't afford everything organic, buy the things that you buy the most often, your favorite foods, buy those organic. So if you eat pasta a couple of times a week, like my family does, or if you eat rice a couple of times a week or potatoes a couple of times a week, make sure that those are organic, okay? And your breads, your cereals, make sure those are organic. And then also next is your fruits, your strawberries, your apples. Very important for those to be organic because of the pesticides. They won't have glyphosate on them because glyphosate would kill them, right? Glyphosate would be on the grains. So that's why you want to go organic with the grains. Chickpeas, oatmeal, wheat bread, very important, especially whole wheat bread, very important for those things to be organic. And then your strawberries, your apples, those types of things without skins on them, very important to be organic to avoid pesticides. And then your heavy metals are most likely going to be found in cinnamon, red meats, and in potatoes and sweet potatoes in the ground. Yeah. So I'm so sorry we don't have more data on like is there a type of potato from a certain area that's not going to have, high heavy metals. We don't have that data yet. So if you are eating potatoes, like I still do, then detox on a regular basis. And there's many different ways to detox. There's natural ways like, cilantro, bentonite, clay, activated charcoal, sweating in a sauna or going for a run, sweating, jumping, to get you to get your lymph nodes stuff moving, but make sure you're detoxing on a regular basis. And
I'm glad you
and
mentioned that because that I
yeah.
know, you hear like get rid of those metals in your body and the parasites and all the things. I mean, we've been trying to do that on sort of a cycle regularly to just make sure that's
Yeah. And
gets
don't
up.
just worry about it though. Don't just worry about it and have anxiety. We don't want everybody to have anxiety from listening to this. I could totally understand if you do. But go to your functional medicine doctor and get your baseline vitamin, minerals, and heavy metals checked. Maybe even your industrial like, you can get tested now for glyphosate and pesticides. We have links on our website on momsacrossamerica.org for that. Or you can just ask your functional medicine doctor. Your Western medical doctor may not be so educated about this. So I would go to a functional medicine doctor or a naturopathic or a holistic doctor and get those tests done. It's like an investment in your health, really. And because you're not going to be able to treat yourself, or your doctor won't be able to treat you. They'll just be throwing, expensive vitamins at you if you don't know what your vitamin levels are and which vitamins you need, or minerals that you need, or heavy metals that you need to detox, right? So just go to a functional medicine doctor and get a baseline, find out how your health is, find out how your child's health is. And from there, you can begin to like sort things out and put the puzzle pieces together and recover your child's or your health. You absolutely can. I've seen this with thousands and thousands of people. People with children with severe autism are now unrecognizably, like it's the teachers cannot tell that they ever had autism.
Wow.
So you can recover. You just need to get the baseline tests done, eat organic food, and then address what needs to be addressed that's going on with your particular child. Everybody is different. So yeah, get those baseline tests.
That's great. That's great. So much. Oh my gosh. Such great information. Thank you so much. If someone is listening to this and it just really hits their heart to get involved besides contacting their legislators, what else can they do to become involved with your organization or with whatever is happening here?
You can go to momsacrossamerica.org, and you can also go to Amazon and you can get my book called Unstoppable. And it tells the whole story about the food supply and what you can do. And it's basically like an activist type of guidebook in certain sections of it and it's all about the food supply as well. And you can go to momsacrossamerica.org and click on connect on the top bar and sign up for our newsletter. And when you sign up for our newsletter, you will get an invitation every Monday for a Moms Connect call. Most Monday nights, sometimes I travel, so I can't, but on most Monday nights, we have a Moms Connect call and also a neighborhood food network call, which encourages people to grow food. And we have special guests, and it's a discussion, and you get to talk with us and ask questions. And so we really encourage you to do that. And if you could be a donor, we appreciate $3 a month, $10 a month, 20, $300 a month, whatever you can afford. We wear 6 hats here, at least each team member, which is very, very tiny here at Moms Across America. And we appreciate your support to get more testing done and to hold our food manufacturers and regulatory agencies to account for providing us with a safe, non-toxic, nutrient-dense food supply.
That's amazing. And I also recommend that everybody follow Moms Across America on social media because they're very active and Zen's been giving great updates about what's going on. I've been watching those and they're so good. So thank you so much again for coming back on the show. It's been such a pleasure again to have you on and I really appreciate it. And I hope the listeners take action from what you've said. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Yeah, you too. This has been the Teaching Your Toddler podcast with Mary Jo Tinlin. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you'll find us on our website at teachingyourtoddler.com, as well as on Facebook at Teaching Your Toddler, on Instagram, and on Twitter at Teaching Toddler. So join us again, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Thank you so much.